You're listening to the Better People Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Warner. With me today is Rhonda Ramirez. She's a licensed professional counselor out of Central Texas. And we took a few weeks off for the summer and reset a few things, but we're going to continue discussing coping mechanisms. Now, I guess before we get into coping mechanisms, how about maybe you talk about the importance of counseling in general?
Yeah, so counseling or therapy, they can be used interchangeably. It's just the very basic description is it's a safe place to talk about things, to organize what's going on in your head, to see what feelings are connected to what behaviors, and just kind of get a hold of kind of what's going on in your head and your world. So, my best description of counseling and therapy is the therapist is not gonna, they don't have any answers for your life because they are not you, but they will provide that safe place. And it's kind of like the person who's going to therapy is in the driver's seat and has a place to go, has a goal, has something that they want to accomplish while they're in therapy, and the therapist is by their side with a map, maybe with a different perspective, with a suggestion of, hey, have you looked at this route, or hey, have you maybe we should backtrack a little so we can get a better start at where we're going, you know? So in my mind, therapy is just a safe place to kind of organize what's going on in your head, because it's difficult sometimes to be able to do that. You're in that whole thing. You can't see the forest for the trees, can't kind of see what's going on. And the therapist is not emotionally connected to anything that is going on in your life. We have a different perspective. We have no answers, but we definitely have a different perspective. And we can point things out that maybe are patterns or things that are reoccurring or things that may be, faulty thoughts or faulty thinking that you can say, oh, okay, well, I never thought about that.
So
I didn't know that.
Well, from your perspective as a counselor, what would you say are the challenges that you face? Like, what's going on through your mind when you're hearing a client discuss, what's been bothering them and talking, generally, what are you attempting to accomplish as a counselor?
My only thing is to listen well. And if I listen well and I kind of reflect back what people are saying, because sometimes you don't know what you're saying until somebody else says it to you. Maybe I've had a situation previously where someone says, well, I'm just so anxious because not everybody likes me. Well, until I said, okay, let's stop for just a second. Your expectation is for everyone in the world to like you. And they were like, oh, no, that's not possible. I said, okay, well, that's what you just said. So maybe we should kind of change that thought. But you don't know that until kind of somebody kind of repeats that back to you. Sometimes you don't know where things are connected, or with maybe you don't even realize the connection until somebody says, hey, that sounds like something else you told me about, when you were young, or about something you saw happen with your parents, or, it's just, my only goal is to listen well and then to reflect back what people are saying, because sometimes it just takes somebody to say it to you.
Well, and the thing is, it's not just a matter of listening. I mean, you've gone through training. I mean, this is something that you've definitely had to be educated to be a listener. And so this isn't there's a difference between talking to just your friend on the phone, and that can help, but you are trained, clinically trained, or at least, professionally trained to listen and to know what key phrases to hear for as well.
Right. Well, yes. So, to be an LPC in the state of Texas, you have to go to an accredited university. My university was also KCREP accredited, which is one level kind of higher than just basic accreditation. It takes, I think it's 60 hours. I don't remember now. That was in 2006 when I graduated, but I think it's 60 hours. And then even after that, you have to provide services under a supervisor for 3,000 hours before you get your own license, so that, the profession is kept ethical, is kept professional, and we're growing people so that they know what to do in lots of different situations. So yes, there's lots of training, but at the very heart of it, I'm just trying to listen. But it took a while to learn how to listen well, and what to listen for, and how to respond to people. So we're not just talking, surface level, that we're really kind of creating those connections and sorting things out, not just, not just talking to your friend.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you keep, in this case, do you keep the topics flowing in the correct direction, or do you care? I mean, are you really just listening to what your client's saying and kind of letting them guide that conversation?
Mm-hmm. For me, my personal style is to be a little bit more laid back, and as we talk about family history and what's going on currently, there always seems to be a theme and a pattern that comes up, or a specific emotion will be repeated often. And I'll be like, well, where's that coming from? Because that doesn't match what's going on, or something like that. So I don't remember what you asked me.
That's okay. I give us kind of, how do you keep the flow intact?
Yes. So, I just, for someone who is not trained, it seems almost a little nebulous for me. There are other theories that people work from that are a little bit more structured. For me, that's not the case, but I can be if I need to be.
Mm-hmm.
I just really just ask, what is the situation that brought you in? Like, what's the last straw that you finally said, okay, let's go talk to someone else. And
it sounds like a part of your training would be to detect, okay, this is something, it's safe to go to this subject, or hey, go back to that. Let's talk about that in more detail. Let's finish that thought.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. And it's client driven. So I always ask people, you tell me what your goals are.
Mm-hmm.
What, give me 2-3 goals that you want to really focus on. And that's where we'll focus. And it may lead a little bit off and kind of fix this over here, or change the way we think about this. And then we go back to that goal.
Mm-hmm.
So we are working on goals. There is a treatment plan, but from the way that I practice, I'm very loose, and we just kind of wade our way through that.
Sure. Now, a question would be, this is just kind of, and if it's crossing an area you can't talk, I mean, I'm not going to ask for specific people, obviously, you can't talk about that, but what would you say has been the catalyst that have brought people in to see a counselor? I mean, do you ever have anyone that just said, hey, you know what, nothing major, but I just wanted to see a counselor, or is there typically been an event in their life that resulted in, I need to see a counselor?
Yeah, so I've been counseling since 2009. So is that 11 years? I think it's 11. No. Yes, I think that's 11 years. Anyway.
Don't worry, we're not a math show. We don't care.
That's right. We're not a math show. But there have been a couple who've come in and said, there's just something that feels unsettled, or I feel a little restless. And I just want to figure out what that means and where it's coming from. But a lot of people, there is like, maybe not a crisis. Sometimes there's a crisis, but maybe there's just this repetitive pattern that they see in their relationships, or there's family angst and they can't figure it out, or they really have some anxiety and depression going on, and they've tried some things on their own, and they can't really kind of get over the hump. So that's what I would say. The majority of them, there might be a crisis. There might be some family relationships that just aren't working well, or there is something that's going on, and they know that it's going on. They just can't figure out what to do to kind of dig out of that place.
Sure. Now, before we started recording, we were talking, and one thing I'd kind of asked is, I mean, I know sounds like we're self-serving to your trade, but would you say that in general, I mean, at some point in someone's life, it is wise to seek counseling at some point, even if there's nothing, a traumatic experience, anything major? Would you recommend that on occasions?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of times people just need help kind of reorganizing, especially through like life transition. I've seen a lot of kids who, and I call them kids because I'm a little bit older. I've seen a lot of kids who are going out of college and into the working world, and that transition is harder than they expected. Mm-hmm. On the other end, I've seen some that, have retired, and that transition has been more difficult and not exactly sure what to do with that. So sometimes it's just transitions in life. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's just going back to, man, I'm not sure who I am, but I think I know who I want to be. Mm-hmm. Let's just talk about that and see if I'm on track.
So kind of I'll go ahead, continue that thought, and I'll come back and have a follow-up question.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there may be a time in everybody's life that they just need somebody to help talk them through, think them through kind of what's going on. And it does not have to be a crisis. It does not have to be a volatile situation. Maybe they're just trying to straighten some things out.
So, beginning of the conversation, just before we started recording, I mentioned mm-hmm. the topic was going to be, coping mechanisms, but, mm-hmm. This may, and you can control the conversation as needed, but, look at life. What would you say is I didn't think about life transitions. You're used to living life one way, and then something has changed and where it's altered it.
Right.
What would be, and again, it's going to vary per client, but what would be some general coping mechanisms for that? Like, how do you assist someone in finding themselves and finding out what they can be?
Right. Well, I think a lot of it is first saying, okay, this is who I want to look like. These are the qualities that I want to be, and then kind of working backwards and say, okay, am I trustworthy? Because that's what I want to be. Mm-hmm. Am I a loyal friend? Do I do that in my daily life? So sometimes we work backwards and say, these are the things I want to be, and I'm not sure I'm doing that right now. Or maybe it looks different because, as we know, friendships change and grow just like everybody else and everything else through life. And if you have a lifelong friendship, your lifelong friendship will definitely change through life stages, and so sometimes it's just redefining what that is to them and how to do that now. Maybe while you were working, you knew exactly who you were because you were identified by what you did, and then you retired, and now you're like, ooh, what does that look like now? How do I know who I am? And
because you've allowed your profession to identify you. Is what's ends up happening, yeah.
Yes, and which is easy to do. Like I think we all do it at some point. So sometimes when we have a big life change, we have to say, okay, what do I want to be now? Like because the best thing about being human is you don't have to be the same you were yesterday. It's not a requirement. You get to change if you want to change, but we have to figure out how to do that. And so, sometimes the life sometimes the life changes. Maybe you've been married for a long time and you have a spouse that passed away, which is can be traumatic. But it's a normal part of a lifespan. And so that's just kind of figuring out, well, what does my life look like now? And then what do I want it to look like? I think a lot of times with life transitions, it's reminding people that again, none of us really know exactly what we're doing. We're doing the best we can. And we just have to learn the new place that we are. That's it.
You mean to tell me those guys who write those books that say that they've got life figured out don't really have life figured out? They just think they do and want to make money?
Yes. They're not truth tellers consistently, because none of us really know. I teach high school as well, and I tell my 17, 18-year-olds that they only think I'm smart because I've helped people be 17 and 18 for 20-something years. Like, I know how to do 17 and 18. I'm 42 now, and I'm struggling. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm 42. I don't know how to do 42.
Right.
But I know how to do 17 and 18. And so they think I'm smart. But I also have people who are in their 60s that I ask, now what do I do? I'm 40. I'm in my 40s. What's next? You've done this before, you know.
And what do they say? What do they tell you?
And they say, well, I know how to do what you're doing, but I don't know how to do 60. I said, well, by the time I get to 60, you'll know how to do 60 and you can help me.
That's good logic. I like that. You know, I think as we age, we start coming to grips with our mortality, and we start coming to grips with, when I was in my 30s, I could run that, or when I was, I could lift that without problems. Now it hurts, or
I could stay up really late and still go to work.
Yeah.
Fine. Yeah. Not the case anymore.
Yeah. Well, the kids, Friday night, they wanted to stay up to watch the Night at the Museum trilogy. And
lovely.
I stayed up with them thinking, I can do this, and
no big deal.
I hit around 2:30, 3 o'clock, and I'm like, yeah, I can't do this. You kids, you take care of yourselves. Don't burn anything down. I'm going to bed, And so, and then the I call him the middle child, which may be giving him a complex, but he's 10. He does not understand why he's tired the next day. And I'm like, son, you've not slept at all.
Right.
You're not sick.
Right.
You just haven't slept. You're going to get sick if you keep staying up all night, because he wanted to do it again. And so, but yeah, looking back historically, I'm like, how did I do that at that age?
Exactly.
Because I'd stay up, play Sega and Nintendo.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I just, we, through our lifespan, we don't know what we're doing right then, but we definitely can help when we look back. That's for sure.
So what would what are some common mechanisms? I want to say coping, but what are some common advice or tips you give to people who are like, hey, I've never done this before. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
What are you typically, what kind of, and again, it's going to vary per person, but what is the general guidelines you're going for?
I generally say, okay, let's write down somewhere what you want it to look like, which really is just writing down goals, right? What kind of goals do you want? If you've never done this, what do you want it to look like in the end? And what we know scientifically is if we write down our goals or say them out loud to someone else, we're more likely to accomplish them. So I usually have people just write down what are the things that you want to accomplish, or what do you want it to look like? And then we talk about it and we go, okay, so let's kind of, again, work backwards and say, okay, so what, if you're anxious about, what steps there may be, let's talk about possible steps. Also, let's talk about, the fact that not everything is predictable, and there will be some things that happen that you were not expecting. So how we're going to be flexible about that, so that we're not rigid with our goals, but that we have a loose direction. Because sometimes goal setting works great, but we can be extremely rigid because that then creates a little anxiety if it doesn't go exactly like we planned. But we also can't just say, you know, in 2 years, I want to have $10,000 saved. Okay, well, now we want to go back. Well, what does that look like? How do we do that? Like,
What steps are you taking now to
right?
get yourself? It's the old adage of, you can't have lobster vision with hot dog,
Right.
lifestyle.
Budget.
And I totally
Yeah.
butchered that, but you've got to. Are you taking actions to get yourself?
Right.
It's like me saying, when I was 8, I wanted to be an astronaut. The chances of me being an astronaut are astronomical, are slim.
Right.
I won't say it's impossible. I guess if I have a couple billions of dollars, I could pay to go into space, but
That's true.
I can now. We couldn't a few years ago. But, the chances of me, okay, Thomas, well, you need to, major in sciences, and you need to probably would help if you were in the Air Force or had some connection to that.
Right.
And so chances of you being the chances of me being an astronaut aren't high. So if I wrote that down, do you ever come across clients who write things down that you're like, hey, listen, I know you really want to do that, and I believe you probably can, but here's the deal. That's a tall order.
Yeah, for sure. I think sometimes that looks like just unrealistic expectations. Sometimes they're like, well, I would say kind of with my 20-year-olds right now, they're like, well, I want to own a house, have a job.
Not in this market.
Yeah, I know. Have a job that I completely and totally agree with all of their ethical workings. And I want to have complete and total family balance so that I can do it all. And I'm like, well,
pick one.
Yeah, that has been a common theme actually, is like, well, we can have it all. We just can't have it all at the same time.
Right.
Right. You can do all of those things, but probably not at the same time. And different times in your life are different priorities. If you're starting a family right now, that children force you to be in the moment. I think it's very positive, but that's what they do. They force you to be in the moment. So you may not be able to do these other things right now. They don't mean they have to go away, but the priority might not be there right now. So, and then, we talk about, and as you do this thing, your expectations or your goals might change a little. You might not want to do that anymore because you have a different view of life and what's going on. So yeah, there's rarely a time when I'm like, well, that's not possible. But there is lots of times where I can say, okay, well, let's think about how realistic it is to be able to do all of that in your 23rd year of life.
Mm-hmm.
But probably not going to happen.
Right. So what would be the difference between, because in our generation, I mean, I'll put us in the same category. That makes me feel better. That the big buzzword that I hear a lot are life coaches. He's a life coach. Is there a stark difference between a life coach and a counselor?
There is. A counselor has a license that is provided by the state of Texas and has specific guidelines and rules that we have to follow, aside from ethics as well.
Mm-hmm.
And a life coach does not have any guidelines.
Basically, it's a guy who says, I'm a coach, I can make you better, I don't have to follow the rules. Gotcha. Yeah. You
could print business cards and say you're a life coach. Now, I'm sure that there are seminars that help train life. I don't know.
Sure.
But what I do know is license from the state of Texas requires a degree from an accredited university. There's a very specific course load that you take. Then again, the other thing is the 3,000 hours of seeing clients but being supervised, which means that you are supervised by someone who has been trained as a supervisor, who also has a supervisor's license. And they are there, again, to make sure that our profession is kept ethical, kept professional. And for those 3,000 hours, you practice under their license. So nothing that you do is not connected to them. So they want to make sure that they are producing the best therapist with their supervision. And then we would meet once a week and just kind of run down what's going on in our cases and what we think. And, they would give us some perspective that, because of their experience, that we definitely didn't have. But also some of that was a personal thing, like, ooh, do you feel like that is triggering things inside you, like as a personal thing? Hearing that, does that affect you, or how do you keep that separate? And just making sure that we provide ethical and professional services.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
not gonna lie, I got a text that came in right as you ended that last sentence.
That's all right. I was like, whoops, is he still there?
Sorry. Hey, we'll keep this in. I won't edit that out. I got to be real with people.
Okay.
So that is interesting, because we hear that a lot, and that's a common self-help theme.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in groups that and coaching can mean many things. It's not necessarily mental health. Coaching could be business coaching, and those sound legitimate. I mean, I would trust somebody who's been in business, but that's the buzzword. You hear,
mm-hmm.
oh, there's a life coach, or be mindful, mm-hmm. and be it's good mental health. We kind of talked about mental health a few episodes ago. There's good versions of it, and there's I guess we were using self-care. I think self-care was the topic we were going for, and there's healthy mm-hmm. self-care, and then there's the unrealistic self-care, and then there's just this feels good, I'm going to call it self-care, and it's really not
exactly
self-care. It's like somebody who says, this is a terrible example, but I'm going to go with it because it's in my head right now. It's like, someone who says, well, I drink water and that's healthy. Well, that's healthy. It's a good thing to do. Or someone who says, but I smoke crack. It's a little bit won't hurt me. It's just a little bit, just enough to no, there's no level. There's no level of crack that you should smoke that's going to be a healthy level.
Yeah.
And so,
right. Yeah.
In this case, the example was nicotine, but there's no healthy level to be consuming of something. But where I was going with that was that we were talking about self-care, though, in that we pick things that, it's kind of interesting, and we're kind of running out, not want to say running out of time, but, I tend to find the subjects of great interest at the very end. And then I'm like, but we're out of time, but, so as far as healthy coping with life changes,
mm-hmm.
you recommend kind of writing down what you are wanting it to be, even if you're not going through a life change, but if you just feel like you're missing something in your life, you write it down, kind of plot out some progressive steps to get you to that location.
And then figure out how is that doable in where I am now? How do I start,
And I don't, some of that can be done on your own, but I definitely think that taking it to a professional that can evaluate it and say, hey, that's healthy, or hey, well, let's think this through. Why do you want to do that?
Right, exactly. Sometimes our steps or our desires are just not healthy, and we have to be kind of enlightened, maybe, or given some awareness of, hey, that looks good, but is that really what you want? Do you really want to, be a millionaire? Like, that may look good.
And don't we all? But it may not be obtainable, at least with the lifestyle and choices you're making.
Right.
And by the way, when you make the right ones, let me know so we can, I can quit. You can quit counseling. No, I'm kidding.
Right. But also the other question is that going to be healthy for you?
Mm-hmm.
one of the things, if you want to do this, is are you going to have to do things that are, if they're unhealthy for you, then I'm not sure that it's worth it. So, then we kind of tumble back into what are your priorities?
Right. And so, and again, this is the subject could go into another episode, and it will, and that's not a problem.
Yeah.
We're talking about coping mechanisms. There's unhealthy coping mechanisms that people think are helping their situation, and I jokingly said crack cocaine or nicotine or alcohol or eating, overeating,
or overspending, gambling. Mindlessly watching TV. Sometimes depends. Sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's not. There's a whole list of things, and really pretty much anything in excess. A healthy coping mechanism is exercising, but over exercising is not healthy.
Sure.
That's an unhealthy coping
mechanism.
Even
and a big detriment I've been seeing in our generation has been social media. And it's the addiction. It's the addiction of I've got to see the next thing. And there was a study, not necessarily a study, but it's how Facebook. And I'm repeating from someone else, so I've not actually I've not searched the interwebs specifically for sources, but the source I'm using seems trustworthy. The way Facebook changed their algorithm was several years ago. They hired people that had worked at casinos who built slot machines. Right. And they told them, said, hey, we want our feeds to operate under that mindset of, okay, you're scrolling. There's nothing really interesting. Oh, that's funny. And versus, because used to Facebook worked as you post content. Once you hit the end, you were at the end, and now what they did was they said, hey, you know what, if we can give them a payoff, like we know what they like. And so they'll see their friend post, they'll see this post, and then, there's the stuff they really like. And they'll want to they'll like that feeling, that dopamine, and they keep going and they keep going. And that's how you end up with the mindless scrolling. Didn't mean to rhyme there, but that's how you end up with that. And TikTok is the same way. TikTok, Twitter, and I'm not knocking those platforms. I mean, I use all three, but I admittedly, I will find myself laying down, or waking up and 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, I need to get ready for work. Let's check this feed out, And in earlier episodes, and I still try to stay on task, is I try to wake up at 5:30, and that gives me time to I do journaling, and then I try to read and do a little study and little Bible study. And then I read out of a book just to try to flush out anything that could be, negative, or at least start my day out on a balance.
In a positive manner.
I try to, but it's so easy to see, used to, when we would go to the malls and sit and what, with the kids' play area, you'd see parents all have their phones out. I was one of them, you'd pull it out and you'd look through their feed or text. And so it's not so much that in and of itself is bad. It's the are you missing out on things that you shouldn't be missing out on because your face is down? And I know 30, 40, 50 years ago, newspapers would have been a similar, there's pictures of people on buses and their heads are all done in their newspapers and magazines. So there's always that thing that can take time.
Yeah, there will always be that thing. It'll change, but there will always be that thing.
Sure.
It's just, trying to be present for the things that you really want to be present for.
Sure. Well, and it's like social media. What I will say about it is, newspapers didn't have notifications popping up. Newspapers didn't have something to grab your attention away. It was just the next article and you were done.
Right.
Phones will in your watch. I mean, I'm talking to you. I said I had a text come through. It came through my watch, and I'm reading my watch. And we didn't. You have more distractive ways, but that could be another topic altogether. So,
for sure.
Yeah, and I tell you what, maybe next time, and we'll make a note to. We try to have a theme here, but we may make a note to continue with healthy coping mechanisms. But maybe we start comparing unhealthy and go down that list, because and we actually have listeners. I've had at least probably four or five people who stop me. They kind of know of me, but they'll say, Thomas, hey, are you that guy who does that podcast, that better person, better guy, better people pod? Like, yes. You know.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I listened to it the other day. That's really good. I'm not bragging about myself, but the fact that they listened really made me feel good. And
yes.
Because I, as I said, I do this for enjoyment, but I do this because it helps. If one person hears something and gets something out of it, that's at the end of the day. I don't make money off of this, at least not yet. I'm not making my $1 million yet. May never, and that's not the goal. The goal is to do it and to enjoy it. So, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to go ahead and wrap up for now. If you want to hang out on the line, that's cool. I'm going to do my outro thing, as we say in the biz, and I'll come back to you in a second. So 1 second here.
Okay.
Yeah. You've been listening to the Better People Podcast. Today's guest has been Rhonda Ramirez, licensed professional counselor from the Central Texas area. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, our website, betterpeoplepodcast.com. Check it out. Find past episodes. Send us an email at hello@betterpeoplepodcast.com. And as always, thanks for listening.